Good morning, my name is Daniela, and today we are going to be group discussing water issues that affect reservations and cities within our nation and how we can get those issues addressed to Congress and to the American people in a good way. So we're talking about water. Is water an entity worth protecting? Or is it just a useful resource we take for granted and that people use for money? On our reservations, water is scarce, contaminated, used for oil production, or commandeered for other uses. The same can be said in many American cities, and that's hurting them as well. So we want to know, how do we decide who regulates water issues? How do we get water spoken about in an ethical way? And so today we have Lainey, who's going to be talking about issues that affect Pine Ridge and Rosebud reservations. We have Sydney, who's going to be telling us about oil production on Fort Berthold. We have Cecilia, who's also going to be talking about issues that affect reservations in general. Tate is going to be telling us about American cities that are being affected right now with water issues. And Bryson is going to be focusing on Flint, Michigan and the water crisis that's been going on there with little to no coverage. And I am going to be talking about water ethics in general on a global scale and how we bring ethics to all of these issues. So right now, Sydney is going to give us the definitions of our terms on our issue.
Definition 1 is we, used to donate or denote oneself and another or others. Definition 2 is get, to receive or come, to have possession, use or enjoyment of. Definition 3, water, a transparent, odorless, tasteless liquid, a compound of hydrogen and oxygen, H2O. Definition 4, issues, an important topic or problem for debate or discussion. Definition 5, on, physically in contact with and supported by a surface. Definition 6, reservations, a legal designation for an area of land managed by a federally recognized Native tribe under the U.S. Bureau of Native Affairs rather than the state subgovernment of the U.S. Definition 7, addressed, a speech or written statement usually formal directed to a particular group or of persons. Definition 8, in, used to indicate inclusion with a space, a place, or limits. Definition 9, Congress, the national legislative body of the U.S. consists of the Senate or upper house and House Representatives or lower house as a continuous institution. Definition 10, American, of or relating to the United States of America or its inhabitants. Definition 11, people, persons, indefinitely collective or collectively persons in general.
Okay, thanks. Ready?
Yeah. Okay, my problem is on the Rosebud and Pine Ridge Indian reservations, and they had to deal with a lot of water shortages due to like flooding from all the snow and all the rain. And a lot of people couldn't leave the reservation, so they didn't have any like water supply at the time. And so they did come up with a solution about water filtration units, but it takes time for those things to come along. And so their other solution was to bring like plastic water bottles for people that needed water, but the plastic is only like creating more pollution and trash in the communities, and yeah, that's basically my problem, and they need like a better solution for their reservations, for their water problems.
Okay.
So, my name is Sydney. I'll be talking about Fort Berthold Reservation, and my question is why my tribe is not stepping up to help save our water that is going out to thousands of oil wells on the reservation. On my reservation, there's at least 2,500 to 3,000 oil wells, and each oil well holds up to 7 million gallons of water, and that's a lot of water that's going out to one oil well. And that will affect like our land in the future because future like spills, and also like it can like go into our water, and that would be like a big effect for everybody. And also they have like a water pipe or something that a lot of semis can take with a permit, but a lot of people are just taking it illegally, and that's because nobody monitors it. Yeah, that's what I have so far. And for like what I say to like help it is probably have like a law of like each land should have like a certain amount of oil wells, because that's too many to have right now. I don't know, it's just like a lack of law and regulation.
Right.
So I talked about, my name is Cecilia Montgomery, and I was talking about how surface and groundwater in the north central region of the U.S. is affected by intense grain production as of recently. And there's a study that revealed that there's a lack of suitable educational programs that teach educators about correct water quality issues. And another one was the water pollution in the Puget Sound. It's near Seattle, Washington. And it mainly focuses on the pollution of the fish in that area and the fishing rights of the Native American fishermen in that area. And the failure, it's due to the failure of the U.S. Clean Water Act to lessen the increase of pollution and the growing impacts of water population. And that also has to do with this, where the U.S. Protection Agency for public and private spent $5 trillion to like provoke to provide clean rivers and drinking water. And that's like all I have right now.
So with that, one of the main issues is fishing is with all of yours, I think too, when pollution is in the water and it filters down to the animals then that live in the rivers, and it's affecting native tribes like that as well. So we're dealing with polluted rivers that affect our fish, and that's a major issue that affects everyone as well, like you said, even American fishermen too. So that's one of the issues that's being felt through our native communities. So Tate is going to talk about American cities too.
My name is Tate Bear, and I will be talking about 3 cities in the nation that are facing water issues. The first city that I researched was Los Angeles, and in 2014 it was listed as one of the most water-stressed cities in the world. And one of the proofs of that was in the same year in 2014, LA was hit with the worst drought in its city history in 1,200 years. And the reasons for the drought included high temperatures and reduced rainfall due to climate change. Following the drought, the next year residents were instructed to limit their water usage by 25%. Since 2015 though, the limitation has been lifted, but recently high temperatures still affect the city, and it still affects the city in ways because in the northern part of California, they have like these snow reserves that are kind of a major water source for them, and those are melting. And the next city I have is Salt Lake City. I found that for every degree increase in Fahrenheit in the city, the streams flow reduce, or like the height of the water reduces by 3.8%. And all these streams and stuff, they lead into the Great Salt Lake, like the major lake by the city. And in the last 170 years, the lake has shrunk to half its original size. In 2014, Salt Lake was at a high level of freshwater vulnerability, and that research was conducted by University of Florida's Environmental Hydrology Laboratory. And in 2015, residents of Salt Lake City were instructed to adjust sprinkler usage and check pipes for leaks due to the city's limited fresh water supply. This news of low fresh water is also bad for the city because in 2050, the city's population is expected to double. And the next city that I've researched is Miami. Due to climate change, the rising sea levels intrudes into the freshwater reserves that they have above and underground. And a city north of Miami, Hallandale Beach, is facing freshwater problems with 6 of their 8 freshwater wells contaminated with salt water due to the rising sea levels due to high climate change. And the Everglades National Park is also being affected. And residents in the Miami-Dade area, there was a survey done and 50% of the residents say that climate change will impact them personally. And that is all of my research.
Right, thanks. And then Bryson's gonna be talking about Flint, Michigan.
Okay, so as you all know, I'll be talking about Flint, Michigan's water crisis. And basically, the main things that I'll be stating is the problems that is caused throughout the city of Flint, and also the action that the city has taken to get the problems resolved, and also suited to their liking. So basically, in 2011, the state of Michigan took over the Flint's finances, and they chipped in at $25 million for the water crisis, which wasn't enough. So basically, they had to. The city announced a new pipeline to reduce the water fund shortfall to Lake Huron to Flint, and basically what that did was it gave a new pipeline to be able to reduce the cost, which they thought was going to be able to reduce everything, which it wasn't. So to fast forward, the problems that it started creating in the city were so traumatic to the city and so devastating that it got to a point where the city had to do more and had to press the issue about what was going on. So they took it to legal actions, and it was a class action lawsuit charge that the state wasn't treating the water with anti-corrosive agents. So basically, that was going on in the city where they took it to the law. After that, the plan was to reduce the cost to switch the water supplies from the DWSD to KWA, which they thought would be able to be a better supply to the crisis that was going on in Flint, which it was, but it also didn't do the job. So fast forward, the EPA rewarded Flint. They rewarded the city with $100 million, and also they also declared a state of emergency because it still just wasn't enough. That's what they were doing. So they took it a step forward. They took it a step further, and they started the federal. They started sending homes bottled filters of water to try to go ahead and reduce the problem that was going on in the city. Because, like I said, the crisis that was going on in the city was like leading to heart diseases, kidney, nerves, behavior disorders, hearing problems, puberty shortages, like people, like kids, and the whole city was being affected by this. So they kept on going on with the issue. Things were they try to go to the federal, and the federal came back and they try to give the people filtered water bottles shipped to everybody's homes. Still wasn't enough. They came up with another problem, saying that the bottles of waters weren't properly checked they weren't checked to see if they were filtered properly, saying that the government was just basically just giving them anything, just trying to reduce the problem that was going on. So next thing they did was a lady, she had wrote a letter to Obama, and that resulted in Obama taking a visit to Flint, Michigan to actually see the problems of the people in the city and to also get a better understanding of what was going on. So in all of this, for the people in the city fighting for what they wanted and fighting for the Water Crisis Act, it also led into NBA star Kyle Kuzma getting involved into a city because that's where he was from, that's where he was born and raised. He was able to get involved with his city. Also, billionaire Elon Musk, he started a foundation where he funded a project with $480,000. Also, it led to the federal putting in new ultraviolet water filtration systems to be installed into the schools, into the community, to go ahead and get the water crisis back on check and be able to give safe drinking water to the community. So with all of that being said, they were able to go ahead and get everything resolved into the liking of the city in 2018. So mind you, it started in 2011, and it's 2018, so it was a lot of acts. It was a lot of action took into place to go ahead and finally get it to where, you know, it was able to be taken care of and under control. So it took a long time. But they kept pressing, they kept pressing, they kept pressing. The government denied them here. They said they came back with a counter. They did this, they came back with a counter until they got what they was looking for. And everybody else chipped in. They had got millionaires, they had got Obama, they had got Kyle Kuzma, NBA star, they had got everything. So.
And you actually have a video on
And I actually have a video too, if you all don't mind.
Yes.
You want to shut the lights down? Not that the sun's on, but.
So this video I'll be playing is which video? I believe this is the video where Kyle Kuzma focuses on the Flint, Michigan water crisis. Yeah, there you go. Is that up? Should I put it in this mode? Or should I put it
What's interesting to me that you guys mentioned these arenas, but never talked about Detroit. And I'm sure, Kuz, you were a Pistons fan at some point, and you understand the environment in that arena. And I want to talk about your connections with the state of Michigan in general. And obviously, there's a connection that you have to Mo Pete, who's one of the more popular former Raptors. Did you ever? Man, you're young, so you obviously you still remember him, the impact that he had in the league.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I grew up going to Mo Pete basketball camps. So like from even back when I was 4th, 5th, 6th grade, like I used to go to those camps all the time. So like having that early interaction, obviously he didn't know who I was back then, but you know, for him I bet it's pretty cool to say, yo, I have an NBA player that goes to my camp. This is all over Flint.
Numbers going up.
You know what I'm saying? So you know, it's definitely super dope to have that connection with, you know, this another Flintstone and a person that, you know, at a young age really inspired me to, you know, get to the NBA, being from Flint. So.
Is there anybody else in the league that you bond with over just your overall Michigan connection?
Draymond, you know, that's the one. He's from Saginaw. That's right up the way. Devin Booker, he's from Michigan as well. You know, all the Michigan guys. Monte Morris, he's one of my best friends. He's from Flint.
Monte Morris is balling.
Balling, yeah. Balling, underrated too.
Mm-hmm.
Under the radar too.
Mm-hmm.
Miles Bridges as well. You know, so Flint is in the NBA.
Speaking of Detroit, you're talking about the arena. They have a new. I think the cities that have new arenas, it's different, way different. It's different now. Like Sacramento, when they had that small arena, even though they weren't great old, it was rocky.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying they still don't have some fans that are rocky, but it's a different arena. It's a little bigger, it's more spaced out. You know, the stands aren't shaking as much.
It's rocking.
It's
Lakers sometimes.
Yeah, it's
rocking.
It's rocking, man. But Detroit, so they got an arena. It's nice, and they're still rebuilding. And I think their fan base is still pretty good too. When they were good, their fan base was really tough to win.
Yeah, you say it's nice because when they played the Pistons, like half the arena it's Raptors fans because it's so.
It's strange. It's really strange. We have a lot of Raptors
Yeah,
right there.
it's right there. Yeah.
We have a lot of Raptors fans, strangely, in a lot of random cities in the East Coast that we can drive right down.
Mhm.
But yeah, nice place to play now. We have to go back there again this weekend, so hopefully we can perform a little better than last time.
Kyle, moving forward, we're moving to another place in the state of Michigan, Flint. Obviously, you talked about how much it means to you and the efforts that you've put forward to try and fix this crisis with the issue of the city not having clean water. What are you hoping to accomplish, and what have you done so far, just so people who are listening can have a clue potentially how they can help the situation?
I mean, I think the biggest thing for me is this, spreading awareness. That's the biggest thing. You know, for me, I'm fresh in the game. Like, there's only so much I can do right now that I want to do so much more in the future. You know, when I have more of my foundation set up, or just little things like that. But it's really crazy. You know, Flint hasn't had clean water since 2014, and it's supposed to get fixed in 2020. But to do that, you have to rip out every single pipe that's underneath the ground to schools or households, and it's crazy. You got lead, you get rashes from it. I remember going home in college maybe 2 or 3 years ago, and I'm not used to the water. My family they're accustomed to doing everything, so I hop in the shower, and I'm only home for 2 days, and I started getting like a random rash on my skin, and it's it's just really crazy that we got a city in our country, on our soil, that is having these problems, but we go out and try to help third world countries, but we have a city dying within our own soil. It's crazy.
Yeah, that's extremely unfortunate. I'm hoping that.
So that was a basic overview, and this is the point of that video was really to show you all that, he wanted to bring awareness, and as big as a platform he has, that's a lot of awareness that he can bring to the world. He plays in the NBA, he's not working now, but he's, I think it's like 2 or 3 years in the league, but just for him, and him to talk about some of the people he was inspired by. He didn't mention it's also another guy, LeBron James. Of course, everyone's aware of LeBron James, right? LeBron James, he's inspired by what he does. LeBron James, he actually started back at home where he's from, in Ohio. He started a school, basically, back to giving to the kids, where it was free tuition to the kids, and also to parents and things of that nature. So just basically bringing awareness, and then having just a NBA vet like LeBron James, showing him the way, to try to, deal with his crisis that he's dealing with in his city and how to take forth. And so I feel like that's a good thing to.
It is. That's a great issue, and like you said, the platform that these stars have to bring awareness. And so my issue kind of deals and overlaps all of these issues because it's a global issue. Water is not just a home issue to us. Water is a people issue, as I've said before. So my issue is, I read an article by David Grunfeld, and in there he talks about, this is in October of 2019, and he's just barely talking about how we can bring ethics into water, how we can bring the management of water into an ethical issue that needs to be addressed. So, like you said, in 2011, in 2010, I guess I should start there, we just now voted, the United Nations just now voted to recognize access to safe water and sanitation as a fundamental human right. That was in 2010. Flint, Michigan started having problems in 2011, but we didn't hear anything from the United Nations addressing Flint, Michigan, even though it's a global, and we were in the United Nations at the time, it's a global issue. But where is the outrage for Flint, Michigan in 2011, when the year before they had just voted to make access to safe water a fundamental human right? So that's one of the issues where we see a lack of regulation, like Sydney said. Who is going to regulate these oil companies in America? We see that money wins out. It's a Western, they call it an ontology, the way that we view things. So there's a Western point of view that says that water is just a commodity. Water can be sellable. we can sell it, we can get rid of it. Whereas 280 tribes within America agree that water is more than just money. Water is something that we all need, something that affects us all, and it needs to be addressed in an ethical way. So David Grunfeld says that this lack of regulation, this lack of morality within these organizations that were put in place to help us preserve our water is the reason that we are here. Like you said, fast forward to 2018, still nothing has been done. President Obama himself wasn't aware of the issue. So this brings us back to another aspect of morality. How do we get people to understand that this affects all of us, not just one of us? Not just a single reservation, but reservations throughout. Not just one city, but many cities. So water issues kind of overlap everything. We are the source of a lot of these issues. It's not just water. It's water leads to the medical problems. Water leads to environmental problems. So I think that once we get people educated, like this guy was saying too, we need education, we need morality in water, and that will help us to solve a lot of other problems, not just our own water issues within our communities. So with regulation, that's where our question was, how do we get water issues addressed to Congress? This is the major factor, is that our Congress isn't talking about it. This water has to be an everyday conversation. It can't just be a crisis conversation. It needs to be addressed directly to our Congress, and we need to have a responsibility in that. Did you want to say something?
Yeah, just to go to show you, I mean, you see, everyday superstar Kyle Kuzma, I mean, how it affects him physically. He said he went back home and he tried to take a shower and he got a rash. So that just basically puts in perspective that it's not just someone like, who's poor, like middle class, low class. This is an issue that has nothing to do with the status of who you are as a human being. This can affect any and everybody. You can be the highest paid man, and you can live in the city, and this can affect you. So I feel like though this is a big issue that needs to be talked about and addressed, because anybody, can really be affected by it.
And
It affects humanity.
exactly. So we want to know how we can, find a solution to that. It's a big problem. It's a big question. But I think the biggest question that we had was how can we address it in Congress? That comes down to education. So we talked a little bit once before about opening chapters, water chapters within TCUs across America, because we do have a special case where we all think the same way, and our discussion is just a discussion. I don't think any one of us has disagreed with anything the other one has said, but we're in a special case here where we all understand and have personal bias a little about how water issues affect us in general, and then of course as Americans. So there's no debate here. This is a discussion about how we're gonna get this carried forward and how it's going to affect not just us but our future generations. And so we talked about opening water chapters where we would use letters and social media now, since it's a giant platform, and address our Congress and have tribal colleges and universities throughout America address this as well, and move it forward to an everyday conversation about everyday people.
Yeah.
And how in the end we are just people. So David Grunfeld talks about the marriage, the necessity for a marriage between this Western thinking and this tribal way of thinking, because it's not just tribes within America. This is Kiwis in New Zealand, and it's Aboriginals in Australia, and we need to marry these two ideas that water, yes, has a use for things like oil, but like Sydney said, in a regulated manner, not just put them everywhere because you can, but regulate that source. Like Lainey said, we need money to regulate and to help find a better solution than just putting plastic bottles in our garbage cans. The boys talked about how it affects cities as well. This is a people issue, and we need to address that as a people issue.
Yeah.
So that's our discussion. Thank you.